All right. So, everybody, this is Michael Meyerhofer, who you've been hearing so much about. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us what you've published?
Yes, I am the before mentioned Michael Meyerhofer. How's it going, guys?
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah. I figured I'd pause there in case anybody wanted to say anything. I got nothing. Let's see. I've been writing poetry and fantasy for a long time. Published, let's see, 4 poetry books and 2 fantasy books. It's a fantasy trilogy, and then the 3rd book in the trilogy is coming out next year. And because I can't take a vacation, I am already working on a sequel to go to the trilogy. I'm already like halfway done with that. So, yeah.
A sequel to the tour. Oh man, I gotta catch up now.
Yeah, you really.
All right. So Michael Meyerhofer and I got our MFAs at the same time at SIU in Carbondale, and he was in poetry and I was in fiction, and so we were at odds. Little did I know that he would write an epic, now 4-part fantasy novel series. We would have invited you to all the fiction parties if we'd known.
I didn't like you people. You didn't like me the way it is. Yeah.
Maybe. So when did you know that you wanted to be a writer?
I think I always did. I don't think that's true for all writers. But for me, when I was reading, like at a really, really young age, I would read like Tolkien or just whatever I got my hands on, and I would read it and think, this is really cool. I want to do this. And so what I would do is just I'd kind of write my own stories that were just like really, really bad rip-offs of whatever I was reading. But that's fine. It was good practice. So I feel like I always knew I wanted to, but I have friends who are writers who kind of didn't know they wanted to do this until later. So I think you can kind of come to it at any point in your life.
Okay, so you talked about Tolkien. Who else did you like to read growing up?
Oh, let's see. I had kind of a weird thing. Like I read a lot of fantasy and science fiction, a little bit of horror growing up. I actually didn't really read poetry until I was about, I don't know, 19 or 20 or so. And then I realized it was actually pretty cool, and it was the opposite of what I had read in school. You know, like contemporary poetry isn't really, it's not just Shakespeare and stuff like that. There's every kind of style. It can be funny, it can be profane, it can be, whatever you want it to do. But to see, who else did I read? When I was reading fantasy, I read a lot of like Dragonlance books, some Forgotten Realms books. Terry Brooks, who did the Sword of Shannara series, I read a lot of that. Read Lord of the Rings, of course. Basically, what I would do, I would just go into the bookstore, and my mom would give me like $10 to leave her alone for a while, and I would go and just look at books and browse, read a few pages at random. If I liked it, I'd buy the book. So I didn't even. This was back before the internet, believe it or not. So there was really no way to even know what was considered good or popular. I just went in and kind of randomly grabbed books, read a bunch.
Okay, and how did you then prepare when you knew you wanted to be a writer? What did you do to prepare to be a writer?
What did I do? I drank a lot of coffee, just absurd amounts of coffee. That wasn't very funny. I'll come up with something better. Sorry. One thing is obviously to write, right? So write as much as you can. If you write something and you read it later and you think, man, this sucks. What the hell was I doing? That's fine. It's all practice. And the other thing I think is to read as much as you can, and that's a really important thing, and that's a thing that people tend to forget, because writing is it's hard work, but it's also a lot of fun. Sometimes people will get so wrapped up in the writing that they'll forget, oh, I also have to read a bunch too. And the benefit of that, reading is fun too, but it's also that you get to see all the other styles and all the other stories, and that can inspire you, kind of let you know what the trends are and give you some different ideas and all that stuff. So it's also really, really important to read as much as you can. It's basically just keep doing those two things.
Okay. And you, did you have creative writing classes in your high school?
I'm trying to remember. Kind of not. I had some lousy teachers, but I had one really, really good English teacher, and he would have us write all kinds of stuff just throughout the course of the class. So I think that was a big help, and my dad was a big help too, actually, because he didn't have very much formal education in writing or anything, but he always just writers, and he loved Star Trek, he loved science fiction, and all that stuff. He made me like that stuff. Um, so it kind of just the environment was, and it was kind of considered cool to read and write. Just kind of weird, but really awesome.
Okay. So were you an English major in college?
Yeah, yeah. I couldn't do anything else. I can't. I don't have any other skills. I would be in jail. I don't know what else I would possibly do.
Well, I'm glad it's working out then.
Yeah, I make dozens of dollars. Yeah.
So what's the difference between writing poetry and writing novels in your process?
Yeah, that's a good question. I get asked that a lot, and is that they're not that different in a weird way. Because you think poetry and you think fantasy or something like that, you think, wow, those are totally different things. But in either, no matter what genre, no matter what style you want to write in, the first course of action, the first thing you have to do is you have to entertain your reader. So it could be scary or disturbing or funny or whatever it is, but they have to be entertained first. You go about it a little bit differently, but they're actually really, really similar in terms of their goals. And then after that, the other thing that's similar is you have to edit, and that's something no writer really likes to do. But you kind of have to force yourself to do it because you get your first draft down, whether it's a story, a poem, whatever it is, and you think, wow, this is awesome. This is the greatest thing that's ever been written in the history of the human race. And then you put it down, and then you walk away, and you come back and realize maybe it's not quite as good as it could be. I want to try and make it a little bit better. So you have to be kind of self-critical. Be willing to say, all right, I care about this thing, and I want to make it as good as I can. Maybe I can read it a couple more times, and put some more work into it. Then kind of get feedback from other people. Sometimes you agree with the feedback. Sometimes you think, you know what, you're wrong. That's fine too. But get some feedback, decide what you agree with, what you don't agree with, all that fun stuff.
So do you have a writing regimen then? Some people say like I get up every day and I get up at 5 o'clock and I don't leave my desk until I've written 500 words or 10 pages.
Those people are lying. Those people are lying. No, not really. But yeah. Actually, I used to wonder that, and I would ask writers, so what do you do? Like, oh, well, yes, I get up and I do yoga at sunrise, and then I drink a pot of coffee, and then I face the mountains, and then I write for 18 hours. No, they don't. I mean, some people do. But for me, what I do is I basically I write whenever I have time. And it's a little bit different for poetry versus fiction, because when you write a poem, it takes almost the same amount of time, I think, because there's fewer words, obviously, but the words have to carry a little bit more weight, I think. So I totally trailed off there. Let me try to fix that. Okay. I think what I do with poetry is that, like, if I have an idea, I'll just jot down a quick idea, and then I can just 10 minutes, 15 minutes throughout the day, I can just work on it a little bit. Whereas if you're writing a novel, we're talking, 2, 3, 4, 5, 600 pages, that you have to write. So it's kind of a little bit different. So then I'll set aside huge chunks of time. So a lot of times I'll write at night. I'm a night owl. Sometimes I'll start writing I'll start writing maybe like 9 or 10 at night and write till sun up sometimes. Other times I'll just write a couple hours here and there whenever I can. So, I was kind of making fun of having a regimen, but actually that's not necessarily a bad thing. if you say I'm going to write 5 hours a day or whatever it is, or 2 hours, even an hour, whatever it is, that's not a bad thing. Anything that gets you writing, whatever works for you, totally fine.
Okay, well now you're gonna think I'm a dork because as I read your fantasy novels and also knowing you, I just walk around the house and I'm like, Clint is my husband who also knows Michael Meyerhofer, and I'm like, how does he come up with this stuff? And Clint's like, are you gonna ask him where he gets his ideas? And I was like, well, that's a really dorky question to ask because that's like the question that every like second grader asks any author they've ever met, right? But how do you come up with the ideas for your fantasy stories? Because everything is made up. You know, the entire world is made up, like the names and the places and everything. So, where'd you come up with that stuff?
I'm just really awesome. I don't know if that was clear, but I'm the greatest. Basically, once you adopt a certain rule, it makes your life a lot easier as a writer. And the rule or the trick is you get a lot of your ideas from your daily life, right? Which sounds kind of silly. I mean, you could see doing that for nonfiction or for poetry or whatever. Well, that's obvious. You write about your daily life and people you encounter, whether it's sad or funny or whatever. But you could do that for fiction too. You can do that for fantasy. The name you'll maybe change the names, but the actions of the people that you encounter in your daily life, that could work in anything. And also, like, the trick, especially to fantasy, I think, is that it has to be believable. So even though you have, dragons and fire and knights and whatever it is, it still has to be believable. The characters still have, the reader still has to read it and think, oh, I can kind of imagine that person in real life. So what you do is you just think of people you actually know, like the quirks that they have, whatever flaws they have, how they look, whatever you got, and then you just put that into your own stuff. Change it a little bit here and there.
So,
in other words, it's a way to make fun of your friends, is what I'm trying to say.
Do you have a system for coming up with names, with your fantasy names? Do you want to tell them some of the names in your book and maybe how you came up with those character names?
Yeah, let's see. Rowan is the main character. Silren is another one. Ygritte, Jalist, Fadera, Daggeth. Yeah, basically I play around with sounds. Because one problem, I think, one thing that I think some fantasy writers will do is they'll make the names too complicated. And they'll just put a bunch of letters together and it has like 18 syllables, and then when he sounds it out, it might sound cool, but the reader looks at it and thinks, what the hell is that? They don't know what to do, and they get kind of intimidated and they don't feel comfortable with it. Yeah, you don't do that. So you don't want to do that, but you also don't want to have really boring names. What's the fun of that? You must have some fun with it. So really, I just kind of sit around and it's like, it probably looks like I'm insane, but I just kind of mutter to myself and like make sounds and then try to come up with something that sounds kind of cool, but isn't super complicated. So if you look at it, you can, after a couple seconds, oh, okay, I can figure out how to pronounce that.
Okay. And what about the places? Did you make yourself a map for your fantasy novel?
Well, yes, I did, Julie. Actually, I think a friend got mad at me because she read a rough draft and she's like, dude, you need a map. I'm like, I don't know how to draw maps. And then she just made me a map. And then we kind of went from there. And another thing is, like, I'm a total idiotic nerd. Like, I'm a total nerd, and I love watching documentaries, like the History Channel. And I love like history documentaries. So for some reason, I just get a kick out of it. So I'll watch like documentaries of like ancient Rome or ancient Greece or Mesopotamia or whatever it is. And I'll kind of like listen for cool little facts. And then I'll think, well, that's kind of cool. Maybe I'll make a fantasy world that's like 30% Rome and 50% like Japan with samurai or whatever it is. And I'll sort of like incorporate some of that stuff. So a lot of times I'll base a lot of my fantasy places on like real historical places, but with a weird twist. And I think that's good because it kind of gives the reader something they recognize a little bit. So other times I just totally pull this out of thin air.
So how do you keep the mythology straight? There's,
Yeah.
for those, you guys haven't read the books yet, but, there's what, like 5 major cities, and they all have their own culture and mythology, and there's people who worship dragons, and then there's people who are kind of more like a samurai group that have their own traditions, and then there's people who are kind of like elves and giants, and so there's a lot going on. So what do you do to keep it all straight?
I write it all down, and then I make mistakes, and I go back and read it. Because this is what's called in fantasy or in sci-fi too. It's called world building. Which is basically where, and this is the really fun stuff. You just get to come up with your whole world, the traditions, the good stuff, the bad stuff that all these different cities and cultures are doing. Who are their gods? What do they worship? What do they not? How do they talk? Are they misogynist? Are they racist? If so, against who? Why? You get to make up all this stuff, but it's also really complicated. So you have to take notes and make sure you don't screw up your own mythology. One thing when I was getting the books published, one thing I really liked about the press is that they sat down with me with a couple different editors who went through sentence by sentence and said, okay, here you said that this city, their favorite color, the color of their flag is blue or something like that. And then, 400 pages later, you said it was like, green or something like that. I mean, look for tiny little mistakes that's really easy to make. But yeah, just take notes on your own story, which sounds kind of weird since you're inventing it. But another thing you can do, I came up with before, is it's kind of the same thing you do when you're building characters. You want to know your characters inside out. No matter what kind of thing you're writing, you have to know your characters. How do they look? Do they have any scars? Do they have a family member who's an alcoholic? Does someone they know swear too much? Do whatever it is. Did they take martial arts? Are they really good at it? Are they really bad at it? Do they walk with a limp? Whatever it is, you have to know every little thing. So you make a long list of traits and descriptions of that person. And then you just have that sheet of paper, and you can just kind of go back and refer to it and use it whenever you need. You can do that with your cities. You can do that with your base stations, your wizard schools, whatever you want.
Okay. So when you started the trilogy, did you know how it was going to end? Do you have an outline? Are you a plotter or a pantser?
Both, which is a total cowardly answer. One thing I did early on is that I was just writing by feel. I just this is fun. I want the story to go here. I'll just have it go here. And I just kind of wrote by the seat of my pants. And it took me years and years longer to finish the books because of that approach, I think. When I didn't know how I was going to end. So I would accidentally write myself into a corner. Situation. Like, crap, how are they going to get out of this? There actually is no way to get out of this. But then what I tried doing after a few different drafts is mapping out what every single chapter was going to do. It's basically like writing like 10 or 12 pages of just chapter summary. And then also telling myself, okay, if I decide the hell with this, I'm going to change this chapter and totally do something different, that's fine too. It kind of like gave me a rough outline to follow. Also, here's my cat.
What's your cat's name?
Seymour. Now he's like eating everything on the floor. Okay, calm down. What was I babbling about? What was I saying? I was saying something.
We all got distracted by the cat. Where were we? Oh, I have another question anyway.
That's good. Yeah, we'll abandon that one.
The cat just made me go crazy. So, well, we were talking about plotters and pantsers and how you were writing yourself into a corner sometimes. So, was this your first novel?
Yeah, I guess so. Which is a weird answer. Like I said, when I was reading as a kid, I would also write stories. So I always had 2 or 3 or 4 novels that I was writing when I was a kid, and gradually they all kind of absorbed each other into one big novel. So, but then I kept rewriting and rewriting and restructuring and reimagining that novel. So Wytchfire, the first book, is probably like the 180th version of that story. But it's the one I like the most, and it's the one I finally settled on. But I kind of like just kept changing, like as I would get older, and I felt like, well, maybe I'm a little bit better writer this year than I was last year. I kind of like rewrite the whole book and start from scratch over and over and over again. I just heard myself.
So how long did it take to write it then? Like from the time that you had the idea, I would say, until the time that you got it published. And how many pages is it? Because I have the Kindle version.
I think it's like 450 pages or 400 pages or so. Once I actually, like I said, mapped it out chapter by chapter and it made it a lot quicker. That probably took about a year-ish to write, about a year. And then once it was accepted for publication, we like edited it a little bit, and it took probably like another year to actually come out.
So it took you like 15 years to make the plan and to write, to do the pre-writing for it?
Pretty much,
and then about 2 years?
Yeah, because like I wrote and wrote and wrote, kept rewriting the damn thing, and finally like mapped it out. And then once I did that, it was so much easier.
All right.
But yeah, probably about two or 3 years once I actually like knew what I was doing.
Did the second book go faster or slower?
A lot faster. Because at that time, because like I didn't actually map out the first book until partway through it, and then I took all the pieces that I had and kind of hammered them all together. But the second book, I thought, well, I'm gonna map it out before I even start, and that made it a lot quicker. I think I wrote that whole book in just like some long marathon sessions, probably like 6 months or so.
Okay. So jumping around a little bit, I know that before you published the novels, you published a ton of poetry, but there are probably a lot of poems that maybe didn't get published. So how do you deal with rejection of your writing?
I break things. That's pretty much it. No.
Cry in a corner.
Cry in the corner and weep and scream how no one loves me. That's a little bit more true than it should be. Okay, let's see. What do I do? Well, because when you write, not everyone's going to like what you write. And no matter how good it is, no matter how much you practice, no matter whatever it is, not everybody's going to like it. I mean, think of Harry Potter. I mean, there are people who hate Harry Potter. Even though it sells millions of copies, people still hate it. Some people still hate it. So it's hard to get that criticism because you want people to like what you're doing because it feels personal and it is personal. But you also have to say, well, if you don't like it, you don't like it. That's the way it is. So especially for poetry, if I get a rejection, or people say, well, I like this one but not that one, I try to like when you send poems out to magazines, if they say we don't want any of these, or I want this one and that one but not this other one, then okay, well, I'll send it somewhere else and kind of just keep working on it, keep sending it somewhere else. I think the trick is basically always stay busy.
Okay, so
this
might be the same answer. What's that?
I have lots of cats too. We have like 4 of these things running around. Yeah.
Stay busy and have 4 cats. That's good writerly advice. So what about writer's block? Do you think it really exists? And if so, what do? How do you keep writing?
One thing I heard that I think is, I don't know if it's true for everybody, but it's true for me. When you have writer's block, what's funny is that you're still writing, you just think the writing sucks. For me, that's definitely true. Like, I'll be writing and think, I have writer's block. Like, well, you just wrote 2 pages. Well, yeah, but it's no good. Okay, well, fair enough. Maybe it sucks, but maybe you can take those ideas and use them for something else. But I have other friends, when they have writer's block, they mean they have like the stereotypical or typical writer's block where they look at a computer screen or a piece of paper and a pen and just stare at it, and they just don't know what to do. That's another form of it. Basically, what you do, that's gets back to what I said earlier about reading as much as you can. The more you read, the more like subconsciously, the more ideas and stories you have in your head that you can kind of twist and turn around, and it helps you out to avoid writer's block, I think. And it's kind of like, it's kind of like exercise too in a way. Like say you're working out every day, and then you just stop for a while. And then when you go back to it, it's going to hurt. It's going to be weird. It's going to feel, but you just force yourself to keep doing it. And then it gets better and it gets fun.
Okay. All right. So he's been talking a lot. So how many people think of themselves as poets? Do you want to raise your hand so we can see who are the poets in the room? And you can be both. You can raise your hand. Raise it high. Be proud of yourselves. Okay.
Yay! Woo!
So lots of poets, and how many people write short stories and like that? Okay. And how many people want to write novels or have written a novel already?
I have.
You haven't written one, but you would? Probably. Yeah. Who has a completed novel? Okay, a couple people. All right, like 3 people. Not bad. Does that make you feel lazy that you didn't have a completed novel by the time you were?
Actually, it does. It really does. It's fine.
Like, what was I doing with my life? Okay, so
Final Fantasy, that's what I was doing.
What questions do you guys have for Michael Meyerhofer? Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I've never read your books, but do you get inspiration for your antagonists the same way that you get inspiration for, say, like main characters or secondary characters?
Yeah. It's also kind of a fun thing too. You can, if you have someone you don't like, and it could be a person that you actually met, or it could just be someone you read about in the news or something you heard about in a history class. It could be anything. You can turn that person into your antagonist. But you also, one thing I learned is that you can't just have villains who are 100% evil, because that's no fun. There's nothing to relate to. You have to have a character who's maybe bad or evil or whatever sometimes, but also good sometimes. So then you'll take characters from good guys that kind of mix all that stuff together, and it makes it more fun. It also makes the reader kind of panicked, which is half the fun of reading like morally ambiguous characters. Again, Harry Potter, Snape is my favorite character because depending on what you read, you're not quite sure whether he's good or bad, and that creates a little bit of panic in the reader. Like, well, is he good or is he bad? I don't know what to do. So you keep reading, But yeah. Oh, the guy in the back had his hand up before, I think.
How do you keep a story going?
That's tough. That can be tough sometimes, especially if you don't map everything out, because you're like, well, what do I do next? You can kind of run out of ideas, especially if you're just kind of writing and you're having fun with it, and then suddenly it's not fun anymore. That can happen a lot. As you get to chapter 10 or something like that, you're like, you know what? I'm not enjoying this anymore. I was having a lot of fun at chapter 7, but now it's kind of hard work. One little trick you can do for that, in addition to mapping stuff out, jump ahead. Nobody ever said you had to write the book in order. Write chapter 12, even though you're only on chapter 5. Why not? You can always fill in the gaps later. If you're thinking, well, okay, I have to get the character from A to B, but I really like this cool fight they're going to have when they get there. Write the fight first. Jump around, have a little more fun with it. Basically, have as much fun writing as you possibly can, because it's a lot of work too, but you should enjoy it.
Oh man, that makes me crazy to not do it in order. But I like to plot things out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does sound harder because then you don't know what's going to happen. I don't know.
One other thing I would add to that, if you do things out of order, sometimes you end up having to go back and change things because you're like, well, I wrote it this way, but now that I kind of filled in the gaps, I don't think they would be in the desert. I think they're going to be on the top of a mountain. They have to change like little things too, but that's fine. What's up?
Like, where do you write? Like, do you have like a desk, or do you write like just anywhere?
Pretty much anywhere. Kind of like right where I am now, only it's less clean. Usually just at home, or I'll go to a coffee shop, put on headphones. Pretty much wherever I can. I mean, like I had a friend who she said she could only write in this one room at this one computer with certain music playing at a certain time of day. But when she was in that situation, she would write beautiful stuff. Other people will write anywhere. So kind of like find what works for you. You write best, in a coffee shop. You write best in your bedroom. You write best, wherever you can. Get your feng shui going.
Right.
No.
Does anybody have any questions about The Substitute, the poem that we read this morning? Go for it.
Did you base that off of like an actual like occurrence?
Yes and no. Which is a terrible answer. What kind of an answer is that? Yes or no? No. Let's try better than that. Yeah, it was based on a real story, and I'm totally giving this away, but it wasn't a student that I had worked with. I was talking to a friend, and they were telling me this story, and they were telling it like so vividly that I felt like I was kind of in their shoes, and I was talking to this student. So I kind of put myself in that when I was writing the poem. And at first I was thinking of a version where I said, I talked to my friend today, and she said she's heard this, and kind of writing it as me hearing someone talk about something. But I thought it was kind of a little bit too complicated or weird, so I just tried, I'll just put myself in that character. So I think being willing to do that, even though it's technically not true, it's a lie, but it's a kind of a white lie, is another good thing for writing. As long as it's like, I guess what I would call emotionally honest, as long as you're not making up the emotion. If you actually did care about what you're writing about, if you change characters, that's fine.
What else? What other questions did you guys have about the poem?
I was wondering, so when she says, because I want to show that I'm tough, I almost thought that there was a reason behind her saying that. Did the actual story have something to do, have a reason that she said something like that?
Yeah, I think so too, and I don't know what it was. And I think maybe that's what bothered me about the story, subconsciously, because why would you say that? Why would you do that? Were you being mistreated at home? Were you being picked on by other kids? What made that person feel that they have to do this to prove that they're tough? Is it just something in our culture? Is it just what is it? Or is it 50 different things? And I'll never know. I have no way of knowing. So that's kind of what I think. That was the big thing that kind of stuck with me without even realizing it, which I didn't think about till just now. Good question.
Well, I brought Death the First Time, which people haven't read yet. A couple people have read because they were here last year. But I was thinking we could follow along with you while you read it, and then we could all talk about it together.
Well, yes, we could. Let me see if I can find it
Good.
without destroying everything. Can you still see me?
Yes.
No.
No? Wow. Right. All set? Oh, wait a minute. What's it like today? Is it hot? Is it cold?
It's kind of hot and disgusting. It's not too disgusting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's 80s and humid.
That's pretty gross.
Yeah. What's it like there? Yeah. You're in a desert though, right?
Yeah, basically it's really hot but not humid at all. So there's cacti and everything. It's pretty cool. And lots of stray cats. All right, moving along. Death the first time. I was 7 running across the ice when I slipped and cracked my skull. Blood bursting like crimson novas on the sidewalk while I dangled from the frantic arms of a nun sprinting towards the principal's office. They asked later if it hurt. The frosty bite, the whole world flipped on its side, then the long needle, the doctor's masked face and careful stitching, searching for a face I recognized. I lied, as all boys must, and said it didn't, that I did not cry fat tears when pain set in. Nor did I mention that first moment weirdly quiet, when I got back up and rejoined the end of recess line, just a little stunned. A strange giddiness as within me something began to rise, untangling its ancient coils and lifting off the deep towards the fresh, bright crack. The cerulean field, and just above, home, the gates wide open.
Yay!
Oh, thank you.
What do you do at the end? I'm like, no, I have to clap. I can't just
That's what
sigh
we're
weirdly. Yeah. So, all right. Well, what did you guys think about this poem? What parts did you like? What lines stuck out to you?
Not a trick question. It's okay. Want me to talk about? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I like the line "I lied as all boys must" and said it didn't, because that's kind of like the idea that a lot of people have, that that boys have to be strong and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I don't think it was like sexist or gender biased in any way. I just think it's just referring to the idea that many children grew up with.
Mhm. You're my favorite person. Yeah. That's one thing that, or I think that's how I like to write about, I guess, gender politics or childhood or the weird things that we grew up with. That's kind of one way I like to write about it, is just write about experiences that I had. I just put it out there that people can deal with it whatever they want. But yeah, it's kind of like that thing when you're a kid. I mean, for all I know, this is true for girls too. But like, you get hurt and you're like, "Oh, I'm fine," really, because there's like blood pouring out of your skull. And like, this is something that actually did happen. I was running in from recess. This is how I run, by the way. And
That's why
then I
he's a poet.
slipped and like yeah, I run like a poet. It's terrible. And fell, and then it didn't even hurt, which is really weird. Um, if you ever hurt yourself, you might know what I'm talking about. Sometimes you hurt yourself and it hurts. Other times you hurt yourself and you don't even feel it. So I got back up like, oh, and I was really embarrassed. Oh, I slipped. Okay, I'm fine. And just kind of went, and people are like, you're bleeding. And I wasn't even scared yet. There was like blood coming down the back of my clothes. And I again wasn't scared, didn't feel it. And all of a sudden, everyone around me is like really freaked out. And the nun, like the teacher, was there. She got really really scared, and she like scooped me up. I was a little kid. She like picked me up, and she's running in like hauling ass, running into the school with me. So that freaked me out. I go, okay, this is serious. And I remember as I'm being carried, I looked down. Pop, pop. There's like blood, like a trail of blood on the sidewalk. Um, and so I was thinking about that memory, and I'm like, I don't know what to say about it exactly because I didn't know what it really meant. I just had the imagery. Um, so I thought, well, I'll just start writing about the action and what I remember and what I saw, and just see what happens. A lot of times, especially when I'm writing a poem, I have no idea how it's going to end. I have no idea where it's going to go. I just start writing.
Using any of our poetic terms that we've been talking about? I really like the blood bursting like crimson novas. I think that's an awesome line.
Yeah.
So why do you think it was weirdly quiet? What do you think the end of the poem means? And then he can accept or reject our answers.
He died.
Do you think he died?
I am now immortal.
So what is the what's beginning to rise? What do you think he means by that? Untangling its ancient coils and lifting off the deep towards the fresh bright crack. What is that? What do you think? Yeah.
Well, just based off like what he said, like he said that he joined the recess line and then like he was a bit embarrassed or but it's like I think like he said it didn't exactly hurt, but like as everybody like started staring at you, you started like feeling a bit more scared, and I think like maybe it was maybe just fear, like rising up, like realization of like what happened after that moment, because maybe in the moment it wasn't as scary, but after seeing what realizing what had happened, it's a bit more.
Yeah, that growing fear that there is blood all over me. Yeah. Anybody else? I kind of thought it was his soul trying to fly out the crack in his skull.
Okay.
All of the above. Yeah.
All of the above?
Yeah. I mean,
There's no wrong answer in poetry, right?
There isn't. There isn't. Like it was about trees. Like no, it wasn't about trees. But yeah, like a lot of times people will say like, "What's this poem mean?" And like I don't know, because when I wrote them, like I know what they mean, but you kind of write on autopilot. So if someone like held a gun to my head and said, "Explain what this poem means," I could describe like half of it. I probably miss some of it because it means everything that's kind of going on subconsciously. So yeah, it means a lot of stuff. Whatever you want.
So do you think it's okay for poems to mean different things to different people?
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
How much responsibility do you feel for what it means, or do you just kind of put it out into the world and then it's everybody's poem and it can mean whatever it should mean to them?
That's a good question. Good job, Jillian. That's a good question. And this is a big debate in all kinds of writing, poetry, fiction, whatever. Like how much responsibility does the writer have to get a certain meaning across, and then what do you do if someone has an entirely different interpretation? My feeling, and there's people who disagree, but my feeling is you want to work as hard as you can to, on the one hand, to make sure that the meaning you're getting across is the one you want to get across, but you also have to loosen up and say, well, if they don't get it, that's fine. It also has to be some fun in this. It has to be, it shouldn't be like a poem or a story is not a lecture. Someone's not talking down to you. It's supposed to be fun to read. So you have to kind of loosen up a little bit too. And then when you loosen up, you have to accept, well, maybe you'll make it as clear as you can, and someone will still say, you know what, I think something else happened. That's fine.
Okay. Well, you talk a lot about having fun when you write. So what's the silliest poem you've ever written? Or the silliest idea that you've ever turned into something?
I read a lot of poems about dreams. I have just really stupid dreams, like really weird dreams. And like it'll all be just like weird stuff happening. And then if I wake up, I'll write down what happened, and then I'll read it later, and then I'll trigger the memory of the dream, and then I'll write about it. I think I had a dream that I was in this mansion, and I was being attacked by flying Teletubbies that would like sprout like razors all over their bodies and like stick to things, and they're like killing people. I'm like, what the hell? And so I was suddenly Texan, by the way. I had a Texas accent and a huge cowboy hat. I don't know why the hell this was. And I like herded all the people in the mansion down into the cellar so they'd be safe. And then like the last person to go was like this like disabled child who handed me a weapon to fight them, which was a broken table leg. So then I was like running around the house with a broken table leg, killing Teletubbies. And I don't know why I had that dream, but that happened.
So you wrote a poem about it?
I tried to. It didn't go well.
That one didn't get published?
No, I might try again today. I just thought of that. Yeah, I might have to give another draft of that. Yeah.
We'd like to read it, I think.
Yeah.
Hannah.
I've heard that the things you dream about are like the very last thing you think about right before you fall asleep.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I just lay around thinking about murdering Teletubbies. I don't know if that's weird. Actually, I don't think that's that weird. That's okay.
all right. Do you have any advice? I guess any advice for people who want to be writers?
Let's see. I can't think of any like funny jokes. So no, yeah, just keep reading, just keep writing. Be both impatient and patient, because it takes a while to become a writer, but you also want to be like really, I think, anxious and work hard and like have this drive to write all the time. I think that helps a lot, and enjoy it.
Does anybody have any final questions? All right. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Hey, thanks guys.
How
You're
long
awesome.
has it been? 45 minutes?
I know it just flies.
It really
by,
has.
doesn't it?
It's
All right.
45 minutes.
Well, I hope you're saying that's a good thing. Let's give him a hand. Yay!
Woo! Thanks guys. You're awesome.